Analysis of discounting with human and non-human populations. Effects of reinforcer magnitude, temporal delay, and probability on discounting rates. Introduction. Within behavioral economics, the field explores the choices that consumers make based on commodities, demand, consumption, substitutions, complements, and various discounting models. There's been several studies that have found that individuals prefer immediate reinforcement compared to delayed reinforcement, and that individuals also prefer larger magnitudes of a reinforcer compared to smaller magnitudes of a reinforcer. This was found in a study conducted by Green and Snyderman in 1980. However, there's been additional studies that found that individuals are more likely to value a smaller, sooner reinforcer more than a larger, delayed reinforcer. This was found within Reed, Nikisela, and Kaplan in 2013. It has also been found that individuals tend to discount probabilistic rewards compared to certain rewards, even if they are the same amount. So this would be they would prefer to have a certain reward over having a probabilistic award, even if the probabilistic award is greater or the same amount. So they want to make sure that it's certain. This was found by Meyerson, Green, and the other author in 2001. So in experiment 1, the purpose of the first study is to examine the effects of a smaller, sooner reinforcer compared to larger, later reinforcers on concurrent change schedules of reinforcement in operant responding of a North American fish. So the subject in this was Zephorius malacatus, which is a neon blue platy Mickey Mouse fish. And the materials within the experiment included a 3-gallon tank that was filled with gravel, a filter, and an LED light. A stopwatch was also used for the delayed reinforcer. And then we also used the R2 Fish School Complete Fish Training Kit. Specifically, we used the black training platform, 2 red poles that each had a 1.5-inch plastic hoop inserted in each, and a feeding wand, as well as Tetramin Tropical Flakes. The feeding wand was used to deliver the reinforcement of the Tetramin Tropical Flakes. So during baseline, there were 2 hoops that were placed into the tank. The schedules of reinforcement operated concurrently, and both of the schedules were on FR2 schedules of reinforcement. So during baseline, this was reinforcement was delivered on the FR2 schedules for both hoops. This was to see if there was a preference in the concurrent schedules, or in one of the concurrent schedules. After baseline, we moved to, baseline only consisted of a total of 6 sessions, and then training phases 1 and 2. So training phase 1 consisted of placing the left hoop into the tank and using a shaping procedures to establish the light as an SD to swim through the hoop. So we would place the left hoop into the tank, and then the feeding wand would be placed into the tank, and when the fish would swim, or the subject would swim into the light, the experimenter would turn off the light and immediately deliver reinforcement. Then the feeding wand was placed in front of the hoop, and when the subject would swim into the light, the experimenter would turn off the light, establishing the SD, and provide immediate reinforcement in front of the hoop. And then I placed the feeding wand behind the hoop. So once the subject swam into the light would then turn off, and in order to receive the reinforcement, the subject would have to swim through the hoop. Training phase 2 consisted of the same exact procedures. However, the right hoop was used only within this phase. And again, we were trying to establish the light as an SD to swim through the hoop. So once the mastery criteria was reached for both training phases, it consisted of 2 consecutive sessions at 80% responding or above. And in all 3 phases of the study, the trials were conducted the sessions were conducted in trial blocks of 5 trials each. Anyways, moving on to the delayed reinforcement and magnitude of reinforcer phase. Here, this phase consisted of placing both hoops into the tank. The left hoop was placed on an FR2 schedule with a fixed time 10-second delayed to the larger reinforcer, which was 2 pieces of 3mm fish food flakes. And then the right hoop was placed on an FR2 schedule with immediate delivery of the smaller reinforcer. So when the subject would swim into the light, the experimenter would turn off the light, and that would signal the SD to swim through one of the hoops. And depending on which hoop was swam through, reinforcement was delivered according to the particular schedule and with or without delay, depending on which hoop it was. So this is a video of baseline, where you will see there are both hoops concurrently in the tank, and the subject is just swam through the right hoop, and reinforcement was not delivered on that one, and then he swam through again, reinforcement was delivered, or I'm sorry, flip that. And then this is another trial where the subject swam through one of the hoops here.
Yes, I lied. I was at the apartment.
And then you will see. Hopefully. And then he swims through the left hoop. So overall, the subject had no specific preference in which hoop to swim through, and reinforcement was delivered according to the particular schedules. So this is one of the training videos of the left hoop. So the light turned off, and the subject is being trained to swim through the hoop according to the SD of the light turning off. And there he goes, he swam through the hoop. Reinforcement was delivered immediately. During the training phases, reinforcement was delivered on an FR1 schedule. He's in the light turned off. Not quite going through the hoop. So this is where the shaping procedures are used to try to train him to understand that the light functions as an SD, and that the behavior needed is to swim through the hoop. And there he goes. So this is a video of the concurrent schedules operating, and within this video the subject actually only swims through the right hoop, which is the smaller sooner reinforcer. The subject definitely preferred the smaller sooner reinforcer compared to the larger later reinforcer, as you will see in the video, because the subject is only going to be swimming through the smaller sooner reinforcer. There was a little bit of a delay here with the SD of the light. Oh, there he goes, he swam through. This was because there was outside variables affecting his responses, including a human walking past the tank as the light turned off, which possibly scared the fish. And there he just swam through the smaller hoop again, or not the smaller, the right hoop again, which is the smaller sooner reinforcer. So the results. For baseline, there was an equal mean of responding on both schedules of reinforcement. The mean for both was 50%. So there you can see here that there was no preference within the schedules of reinforcement. So training phase 1, you can see over here. It's phase 1. There was 15 sessions to reach mastery criteria, and sessions 6 through 9, or 7 through 9. Anyways, sessions 5 through 9 demonstrated 0 correct responding, and then sessions 10 through 19, you can see that there was definitely a increasing trend in the number of responses, and by sessions 18 and 19, the subject reached mastery criteria. So then we implemented training phase 2, and there was 7 total sessions to reach mastery criteria. It looks like some of the training generalized over to the right hoop of the smaller sooner reinforcer. Keep in mind that for the training phases that the reinforcement was delivered on an FR1 schedule. However, by sessions 25 and 26, the subject reached the mastery criteria. So for the concurrent chained schedules of reinforcement, the mean percentage of responses for the smaller, sooner reinforcer was a mean of 66% responding, with a range of 40 to 80% responding. And then the mean percentage of responses for the larger, later reinforcer was mean as 34% responding, with a range of 20 to 60% responding. So looking at the graph here, you can absolutely see that the subject preferred the right hoop of the smaller, sooner reinforcer, and that there were many more responses going through this hoop, and that after the initial 2 sessions here, the subject started to realize that there was a delay in the reinforcement and that the magnitude was larger. However, it preferred that smaller, sooner reinforcement, as you can see in the data here. So experiment 2. The purpose of the second study is to examine choice and preference in an at-risk group of smokers and a control group of non-smokers by administering a temporal discounting survey and a probability discounting survey. So for the participants, there were 10 individuals who smoked at least 10 cigarettes a day, and this was our at-risk group. And then our control group consisted of 10 individuals who did not smoke cigarettes at all. The materials for the study were the Kirby MCQ, which analyzed the which was a delayed discounting survey using hypothetical amounts of money. The modified MCQ was a probability discounting survey using hypothetical amounts of money, and this was based off of the Kirby MCQ. However, instead of using delay, probability was used, and it was calculated using about the same difference as was used in the delay discounting survey. So the procedures were to administer the surveys to both groups of participants and then analyze the data to find the subjective values in the discounting rates using hyperbolic model functions. So each individual has a different subjective value for the delay reinforcer, the delayed reinforcer, or the delayed amount of money, and they also have different subjective values for the probability of these amounts. So the hyperbolic model functions for the delayed discounting function was V equals the amount divided by 1 plus the discounting rate times the delay in days. So the V was the subjective value of the delayed money, the A was the actual amount of the delayed money, the K was the discounting rate, and D was the delay in days. For the probability discounting function, we used a function that was V, so the subjective value equals the actual amount of money that could be won, divided by 1 plus the rate of discounting times the odds against. And then O, so that was odds against receiving the money, equals 1 divided by the probability of receiving the money minus 1. So all of the math was definitely used within this study. And the results were that for the delayed discounting MCQ, the control group mean discounting rate was 0.0201. The at-risk group mean discounting rate was 0.0560. So if you're looking at the top graph up there, the dashed line is the discounting curve for the at-risk or the smokers. And then the solid line was the control group. And you can see that the smokers discounted the delayed amounts much steeper than the control group. For the PD MCQ, the control group had a discounting rate of 1.399 plus a whole bunch of numbers, and then the PD MCQ at-risk group of smokers had a discounting rate of 7.047 plus a whole bunch of other numbers. So looking at the graph here, again, the solid line is the control group, and it's a pretty steady line overall of increasing. So the value definitely increased as the as the probability of winning increased. But when you look at the smoking group of the dashed lines, you'll see that they discounted a lot of those lower probability of winnings much more steeply than the control group overall. So discussion. Experiment 1. Subjects demonstrated a higher mean percentage of responding for the smaller sooner reinforcer over the larger later reinforcer. This supports previous literature in which temporal delayed reinforcers will be discounted more steeply than immediate reinforcers, regardless of the magnitude of the reinforcer. So when we were talking about the, we'll continue. Anyways, this contributes to the reverse translational research, where there's been a lot of research conducted with humans regarding smaller sooner and larger later reinforcers, as well as magnitude of reinforcers, but this takes it a step back and reverses that research into more basic laboratory type settings, and it is again supporting the previous literature, and so it's pretty legit. In experiment 2, the delayed discounting MCQ, the smokers discounted the delayed money more steeply than the control group, so that K value was greater for the smokers, which means that when that K value is greater, that they're discounting the delayed money more steeply than the control group. In the PD MCQ, so the probability one, the smokers also discounted money more steeply as the odds against winning increased, so that H value was significantly higher than the control group, as it was like 7 point whatever, and for the control group it was 1 point or 2 point. It was 1 point extra numbers, but so overall, the higher H value ends up meaning that they discount those odds in the money more so than the control group. So this also supports previous literature. So Reynolds et al. They actually conducted a similar study with smokers and non-smokers, and they found similar findings with the group of smokers versus the non-smokers. And they found that the smokers discounted the delay and the probability more steeply than their control groups. This did vary from the Reynolds study, however, because the probability was more steeply discounted than the delay. So when we were looking at the two graphs, the discounting curves for the probability were steeper than for the delay, and in Reynolds, it was actually the opposite. This could have contributed to the number of cigarettes that considered the individual to be a smoker. Within the current study, it was only 10 cigarettes, and within Reynolds, it was 20 cigarettes. So the amount of cigarettes smoked per day, or the deeper the addiction, could have a result on the discounting rates overall. So some of the limitations within this study were the sample size. Overall, in experiment 1, there was only 1 subject, and within experiment 2, there were 20 total subjects. So these are relatively small sample sizes, which leave a lot of room for error. Another limitation within experiment 1 is that the light functioning as the SD was a little bit difficult to control, as there were a lot of other light sources contributing to illuminating the tank, which could have resulted in slower responses after the SD was initiated or the light was turned off, because the tank was still illuminated by some of those other outside light sources. Overall, future research should focus on the differences in the magnitude of the smoker, so how many cigarettes per day they smoke, and the effects that it has on discounting overall. This could really help with future interventions that are focused on smoking cessation, and it could help us understand further the values of these commodities overall. And then these are the references.